Before we dive in, let me tell you exactly what we're going to explore together in this journey. We will begin by understanding what weakness truly means according to Jungian psychology and why it is not what we usually think it is. We will then uncover how our unconscious mind creates illusions of weakness that hold us back. After that, we will discuss Jung's idea of the shadow and how facing it transforms weakness into hidden strength. We will talk about how to build resilience by confronting the parts of ourselves we are most afraid of. Then, we'll dive into how the integration of opposites within our personality creates true power. We'll also explore real-life examples, practical applications, and daily practices you can use to gradually erase weakness from your life, not by denying it, but by transforming it. Finally, we'll end with a reflection on how embracing Jung's wisdom allows you to live with courage, authenticity, and unstoppable inner strength. Now, let's begin. When Carl Jung spoke about weakness, he wasn't speaking in the same way most of us do. We often think of weakness as the inability to act, to fight, or to achieve. We associate it with failure, fear, insecurity, or lack of confidence. But for Jung, weakness was not about lacking muscles, status, or achievements. Weakness was deeply tied to the unconscious parts of ourselves, the places we avoid looking at because they feel uncomfortable, shameful, or frightening. To Jung, weakness was often a mask, a story we tell ourselves because we have not yet faced the deeper truths hidden in our psyche. If you've ever felt weak in front of a challenge, if you've ever felt powerless in front of a toxic relationship, if you've ever felt that no matter how much you try, you cannot rise above certain habits or fears, then you have experienced the kind of weakness Jung was talking about. And here is the paradox. This weakness is not something you need to destroy. It is something you need to understand. Because every weakness, in Jung's view, hides its opposite. Every place where you feel powerless is secretly holding the key to your deepest power. Think about this for a moment. Imagine a person who is extremely shy. Their weakness on the surface is the inability to speak up, to shine, to be seen. But Jung would ask, why is this person shy? What lies beneath? Often, behind that shyness is an incredible ability to observe, to listen, to empathize, to notice details that others miss. The so-called weakness of shyness hides the strength of deep perception. Once the person integrates this part of themselves, once they stop running away from their quietness and instead learn to use it, they turn what they thought was weakness into one of their greatest powers. This is how Jung saw human beings. He believed that inside each of us there is a hidden reservoir of potential, but most of us never tap into it because we are too busy denying, avoiding, or rejecting our perceived flaws. Instead of listening to our fears, we silence them. Instead of examining our anger, we repress it. Instead of admitting our sadness, we pretend we're fine. And in doing so, we bury the very material that could transform our lives. So what makes us weak? It is not fear itself. It is not sadness itself. It is not insecurity itself. What makes us weak is our refusal to face these things. Weakness, in Jung's eyes, was avoidance. Strength, therefore, was not about being fearless. It was about having the courage to confront fear. But Jung went even further. He introduced one of his most powerful ideas, the shadow. The shadow is everything inside you that you reject, deny, or hide. It's the side of you that feels unacceptable. It is where your insecurities, fears, and shame live. But it is also where your untapped talents, strengths, and desires are buried. If you ignore your shadow, it controls you from the dark. But if you face it, if you bring it into the light, it becomes your greatest ally. Let's pause here and think. What parts of yourself do you call weakness? Do you think you are too emotional, too sensitive, too angry, too indecisive, too fearful? Whatever label you've given yourself, that is where your shadow may be hiding. And the Jungian path is not to erase these parts of you in the sense of destroying them, but to erase the illusion that they are weakness. Instead, you learn to see them as portals to strength. For example, let's talk about sensitivity. In our modern world, sensitivity is often labeled as a weakness. People are told to toughen up, to stop being so emotional. But Jung would say, what is sensitivity really? It is the ability to feel deeply, to connect with subtle energies, to notice what others overlook. The person who is sensitive is capable of empathy, of creativity, of intuition. Their sensitivity may cause them pain, yes, but it also makes them capable of love, compassion, and profound insight. So, is sensitivity really a weakness, or is it a form of hidden power that has not yet been properly integrated? This is the transformation Jung invites us into. Instead of trying to eliminate parts of yourself, you bring them into wholeness. Instead of rejecting your shadow, you integrate it. And in this process, your weaknesses begin to dissolve, not because you've destroyed them, but because you've realized they were never weakness in the first place. They were invitations to growth. Jung often said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. What does this mean? It means you do not grow by pretending everything is fine, by forcing yourself to be positive all the time, by ignoring your flaws. You grow by looking into the darkness, by acknowledging your fears, by naming your insecurities, and by accepting that they are a part of you. Only then can you transform them. Imagine your mind as a house. Most people live only in the bright, well-decorated rooms, the parts of themselves they are proud of, the traits they show to others. But in the basement of this house are all the parts they don't want to face. Their fears, their rage, their shame, their failures. They lock the door to the basement and pretend it doesn't exist. But the truth is, everything in that basement is alive. It whispers at night. It seeps through the cracks. It shapes their behaviors in ways they don't even realize. Jung's invitation is simple. Open the basement door. Go down with a light. Look at what's there. Because until you do, those hidden parts will control you. But once you see them, once you embrace them, you take back your power. This is the essence of erasing weakness. Not denial, but confrontation. Not destruction, but integration. Let's bring this into a practical example. Imagine someone who feels weak because they are easily angered. They hate this about themselves. They try to suppress their anger, to hide it, to pretend they're always calm. But the anger doesn't go away. It shows up in sudden outbursts, in resentment, in passive aggression. The more they try to deny it, the stronger it becomes. Jung would say, this anger is part of your shadow. It is not your enemy. If you face it, if you ask, why am I angry? What is this anger trying to protect? Then you begin to learn. Often, anger hides a deep desire for justice, for respect, for boundaries. The so-called weakness of anger becomes a teacher. By integrating it, this person learns to set boundaries with confidence. They learn to channel their energy into fighting for what matters. Their anger transforms into strength. This is what Jung means by turning weakness into power. You do not get rid of your shadow. You become whole by including it. Now, let's reflect on how this applies to daily life. Every time you feel weak, ask yourself, what am I avoiding? What part of myself am I refusing to face? Weakness is usually a signal. It is your psyche's way of saying, there is something here you need to see. If you lean into it, instead of running away, you begin the process of integration. When Jung studied myths, religions, and stories across cultures, he noticed that the hero always faces a dragon, a monster, or a shadowy figure. This is no accident. The dragon represents the parts of ourselves we are most afraid of. But in every myth, the treasure is guarded by the dragon. You cannot get the treasure without facing the beast. And this is exactly how life works. The treasure of your strength, your authenticity, your true self is guarded by the things you are most afraid to confront. Your so-called weaknesses are the dragons in your story. But if you face them, if you integrate them, they become the guardians of your treasure. This is why Jung believed that the path to strength is the path of wholeness. Not perfection, not denial, but wholeness. And wholeness means embracing all that you are. The light and the dark, the joy and the pain, the confidence and the insecurity. When you do this, weakness loses its grip. When we begin to see weakness as a messenger rather than an enemy, our relationship with ourselves changes. Instead of constantly fighting who we are, we begin to listen. Jung often pointed out that the psyche speaks in symbols, in dreams, in emotions, and in patterns of behavior. Weakness is one of those symbolic languages. When you feel powerless, it is usually not because you truly lack power, but because something in your unconscious is asking for your attention. Think about moments in your life where you felt paralyzed by fear or insecurity. Maybe it was before speaking in public, before making a difficult decision, or before confessing something important to someone. In those moments, weakness feels overwhelming. But if you look closely, the weakness is actually pointing you to what matters most. If you didn't care about the outcome, you wouldn't feel fear at all. The very intensity of your weakness signals that something valuable is at stake. Weakness is often a compass, showing you the direction of your growth. Jung warned that most people waste their lives running from their shadow. They avoid difficult truths. They hide their vulnerabilities. They wear masks to appear strong. But behind those masks, their lives are controlled by what they refuse to face. He used the phrase, "What you resist, persists." The more you resist your feelings of weakness, the more powerful they become. But when you turn around and face them directly, something incredible happens. The illusion of weakness begins to dissolve. Let's explore this through another example. Imagine someone who has always been afraid of rejection. Because of this, they never ask for what they want. They don't pursue opportunities. They avoid relationships. They live small. On the surface, their weakness is fear of rejection. But Jung would say, what is behind this fear? Often, it is the belief that one's worth depends on the approval of others. The real shadow here is the lack of self-acceptance. If this person begins to face their fear, by daring to ask, by daring to risk rejection, they slowly learn that rejection does not destroy them. They discover that their worth is not tied to anyone's opinion. What seemed like weakness was really a teacher pointing them toward self-love. Jung believed that weakness always contains a lesson. It shows you the areas where you are not yet whole. Instead of cursing your weakness, you can ask, what is this teaching me? If you feel weak in relationships, maybe it is teaching you about boundaries. If you feel weak in your career, maybe it is teaching you about courage. If you feel weak emotionally, maybe it is teaching you about vulnerability and connection. Every weakness, when examined, becomes a path to strength. This is why Jungian psychology is so radical. It does not say, be positive, ignore the dark side, pretend everything is fine. Instead, it says, go into the dark, because that is where you will find the gold. Jung used the phrase gold in the shadow. He meant that your greatest potential often lies hidden in the very places you are most ashamed of. Now, let's connect this to everyday life more deeply. Suppose you often feel overwhelmed by anxiety. You might see this as a weakness, something that prevents you from living fully. But anxiety, when you listen to it, often contains wisdom. It may be telling you that something in your life is out of balance. Perhaps you are living against your values. Perhaps you are ignoring your intuition. Perhaps you are trying to control things that are not meant to be controlled. If you treat anxiety only as weakness, you will fight it endlessly. But if you treat it as a signal, you can learn from it. Slowly, You transform it from an enemy into a guide. One of Jung's most powerful insights was that strength is born not from perfection, but from integration. Integration means bringing together all parts of yourself into harmony. It means you no longer split your personality into the good parts one accepts and the bad parts one hide. You allow yourself to be whole. And here's the truth. Wholeness makes you unshakable. When you have accepted both your light and your darkness, what can the world threaten you with? If you have already looked at your fears, your anger, your shame, and made peace with them, then life cannot use them against you. This is why Jung believed the integrated person is truly free. Think of it like this. Imagine you are standing on a stage and someone in the audience yells out your biggest insecurity. If you haven't accepted it, you will collapse. You will feel humiliated, weak, destroyed. But if you have already faced it within yourself, if you have already integrated it, then it cannot hurt you. It has no power over you. This is the state Jung wanted people to reach. The state where your so-called weaknesses no longer control you because you have embraced them fully. Let's pause and reflect on this idea in your own life. What are the things that scare you the most if others were to see them? Is it your fear of failure? Your hidden anger? Your insecurities about your appearance, your abilities, your past mistakes? These are the areas of your shadow. And every time you avoid them, they gain power over you. But every time you face them, they lose their grip. The act of looking at your shadow is itself an act of strength. Now, you might be wondering, how do we actually do this in practice? Jung was not only a thinker, he was also deeply concerned with practical transformation. He encouraged practices like journaling, active imagination, and dream analysis to uncover the unconscious. But in simple terms, you can begin by doing 3 things. First, notice your triggers. Whenever you feel weak, afraid, angry, or ashamed, pause and ask, what is this really about? What part of me is being touched right now? These triggers are direct pathways to your shadow. Second, give your shadow a voice. Instead of pushing away the part of you that feels weak, try to listen to it. Imagine it as a character speaking to you. What would it say? Often, you'll discover that the part of you you've called weak is simply misunderstood. Third, practice self-acceptance. This does not mean you justify harmful behavior or stop growing. It means you stop fighting your own nature. You accept that being human includes fear, sadness, and imperfection. By softening your resistance, you open space for transformation. Here's a powerful truth. What you accept transforms, but what you reject persists. If you accept your fear, you can learn from it and grow. If you reject it, it will haunt you. Jung also warned against trying to become good in a shallow sense. Many people try to be good by repressing everything dark inside them. They pretend they have no anger, no jealousy, no selfishness. But this false goodness makes them fragile. The moment life challenges them, their repressed shadow bursts out uncontrollably. True strength is not being flawless. It is being honest. When you admit your flaws, you control them. When you deny them, they control you. This brings us to one of Jung's most challenging but liberating ideas. You must embrace your inner contradictions. Human beings are not simple. We are kind and cruel, brave and afraid, selfish and generous, light and dark. Weakness comes from trying to be only one thing while rejecting the rest. Strength comes from embracing all that you are. Think about it. A person who accepts that they can be both brave and afraid is actually more courageous than someone who insists they are never afraid. Why? Because courage is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to act in spite of fear. Similarly, a person who admits they have both selfish and generous impulses can make conscious choices, while someone who pretends to be purely generous may unconsciously act out selfishness in hidden ways. This is why Jung said, The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And who you truly are is not just your strengths. It is also your weaknesses, your shadow, your contradictions. When you embrace them, you become whole. And when you are whole, no part of you is left unused. You stop wasting energy fighting yourself, and all that energy becomes available for living, creating, and loving. So, when we say this video will erase your weakness, what we really mean is, it will erase the illusion of weakness. It will erase the false belief that some parts of you make you powerless. Instead, you will see that those very parts are the doorway to your deepest power. Let's imagine your life after integrating this wisdom. Picture waking up in the morning no longer ashamed of who you are. You don't waste energy hiding your flaws. You don't crumble when life challenges you because you have already faced the darkest corners of your mind. You move through the world with quiet strength, not because you are perfect, but because you are whole. This is the Jungian vision of strength, authenticity, resilience, and wholeness. And here is the most beautiful part. When you erase the illusion of weakness in yourself, you begin to see others differently. Instead of judging people for their flaws, you see their hidden potential. Instead of labeling others as weak, you recognize that they too are on the journey of facing their shadow. You develop compassion, and compassion itself is one of the highest forms of strength. This transformation does not happen overnight. It is a lifelong journey, but every step you take in facing your shadow brings you closer to true strength. Remember, the dragon always guards the treasure. Your weaknesses are not the end of your story. They are the beginning of your awakening. When Jung explored the idea of weakness, he always tied it back to the deeper truth that the unconscious rules most of our lives. We think we are in control, but in reality, our unexamined fears, hidden desires, and unresolved wounds guide our behavior far more than we admit. Weakness, then, is often a signal that the unconscious is calling out to us. It is saying, there is something here you have not yet faced. This is why simply trying harder rarely works. Have you ever noticed how people who try to overcome weakness by sheer willpower often fall back into the same patterns? The person who vows never to lose their temper again ends up exploding days later. The person who promises to stop being afraid of speaking in public still feels paralyzed when the moment comes. The person who tries to erase jealousy by force finds themselves consumed by it again. Why? Because they are fighting the symptom, not the root. Jung teaches us that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will continue to direct our lives, and we will call it fate. Weakness is not solved by ignoring or suppressing it. It is solved by going deeper, by asking, what part of myself am I not seeing? What wound am I avoiding? What truth am I afraid of? This is uncomfortable work, and that's why most people avoid it. But it is also the only way to transform. Let me give you a powerful metaphor. Imagine your psyche as an iceberg. Above the waterline is your conscious self. The traits you show, the strengths you display, the parts of yourself you accept. Below the waterline is your unconscious. Your fears, your wounds, your desires, your shadow. Weakness is what happens when something from below the waterline pushes against the surface. You feel shaken, anxious, powerless, but that is only the tip of the iceberg. If you dive below and explore, you realize there is far more going on than you first imagined. Take the example of someone who constantly feels weak in relationships. They might say, I'm just bad at love. I'm too needy. I always get hurt. On the surface, that looks like weakness. But Jung would ask, what lies below the waterline? Often, there is a childhood wound, an unconscious pattern, a fear of abandonment or rejection. Unless the person confronts this root cause, the weakness will keep repeating itself. But if they do the inner work, if they shine light on the unconscious, they begin to heal. What once felt like weakness becomes a path to deeper love, because they have learned to understand and nurture themselves in ways they never did before. This is the Jungian way. You don't erase weakness by pretending to be strong. You erase it by uncovering the deeper truth that was hidden inside it. But Jung also gave us another important insight. Strength without weakness is dangerous. Think about that. If someone only shows power, only dominance, only confidence, they may look strong. But in reality, they are brittle. They have built an image of strength, but beneath it, their denied weaknesses are festering. One small crack, and the whole image collapses. This is why we see people who seem powerful on the outside suddenly fall apart when life challenges them. Their strength was not real, it was a mask. True strength, Jung reminds us, comes from embracing weakness. Why? Because weakness teaches humility. It teaches empathy. It keeps us grounded. Without weakness, our strength becomes arrogance. But when we integrate weakness, strength becomes compassion. It becomes wisdom. Consider the archetype of the wise elder. What makes them strong is not that they have never failed or never been weak. Quite the opposite. Their wisdom comes from having faced their weakness again and again and learning from it. They are strong because they know they are not invincible. They are strong because they have accepted their fragility. This is the paradox Jung invites us into. The more we accept our weakness, the stronger we become. Now, let's look at another angle. Projection. Jung explained that we often see in others what we deny in ourselves. If you reject your own weakness, you will begin to see it everywhere in other people. You'll notice their flaws, their insecurities, their mistakes, and you'll judge them harshly. But in reality, you are judging your own shadow reflected back at you. This is why people who are insecure often accuse others of weakness. They cannot tolerate in others what they refuse to face in themselves. If you want to know your own weaknesses, Jung would say, look at what irritates you most in others. If someone's cowardice enrages you, perhaps you are avoiding your own fears. If someone's arrogance offends you deeply, perhaps you are hiding your own pride. If someone's sadness feels unbearable, perhaps you are repressing your own grief. What you cannot stand in others often reveals what you have not yet accepted in yourself. This is uncomfortable, but it is also liberating. Because once you see that your judgments are mirrors, you gain a powerful tool. Instead of blaming others, you turn inward. You ask, why does this bother me so much? What part of me is being reflected here? Each time you do this, you uncover another piece of your shadow. And each piece you integrate makes you stronger. Let's take a practical exercise. Think of someone who frustrates you. Ask yourself, what exactly about them irritates me? Then ask, do I ever show this trait, even in small ways? Do I deny it in myself? Often, you'll realize that the thing you despise in them is a disowned part of you. By acknowledging it, you reclaim more of your wholeness. And as Jung taught, wholeness is strength. Another way Jung invites us to erase weakness is by reconnecting with our inner archetypes. Archetypes are universal patterns of energy within the human psyche. The hero, the lover, the sage, the child, the warrior, the creator, and so on. Each archetype has strengths and weaknesses. For example, the warrior archetype gives us courage and discipline, but if unbalanced, it can lead to aggression. The lover archetype gives us passion and connection, but unbalanced, it can lead to obsession. Weakness often arises when one archetype is out of balance or repressed. If you feel powerless, Jung would suggest you look at which archetype you are neglecting. Maybe you need to awaken your inner warrior to stand up and fight for your life. Maybe you need to awaken your inner lover to connect with others more deeply. Maybe you need to awaken your inner sage to find wisdom in reflection. By balancing these archetypes, you erase weakness not by becoming someone else, but by activating the dormant energies within you. Jung also spoke of individuation, the process of becoming your true self. Individuation means integrating all aspects of your psyche into harmony. Weakness, in this process, is like a compass pointing you toward the areas you still need to integrate. If you feel weak, it does not mean you are failing. It means your psyche is showing you where to grow. Instead of being discouraged, you can see weakness as guidance. It is your soul saying, "Here is the next step on your journey to wholeness." Let's apply this to a real-life scenario. Imagine someone who feels weak because they cannot say no. They always agree to help others, even when they are exhausted. They fear that saying no will make people dislike them. On the surface, this looks like weakness, a lack of boundaries. But if we see it through Jung's lens, it is an invitation. The unconscious is asking this person to integrate the warrior archetype, the part of them that protects and asserts. Their inability to say no is the dragon guarding the treasure of their strength. By learning to set boundaries, they don't just erase the weakness, they unlock a powerful new dimension of themselves. This shows us something profound. Weakness is not a dead end. It is an arrow pointing toward the strength you have not yet discovered. And here is where Jung's wisdom becomes deeply practical for all of us. Every time you catch yourself thinking, "I'm weak because I'm too emotional," or "I'm weak because I'm not confident," or "I'm weak because I'm afraid," stop and reframe it. Instead ask, what hidden strength is this weakness pointing me toward? What archetype? What shadow? What truth is waiting to be integrated here? This simple shift in perspective changes everything. Instead of being ashamed of weakness, you become curious about it. And curiosity is the beginning of transformation. There is also another level to this: collective weakness. Jung observed that just as individuals have shadows, societies do too. Entire cultures repress certain qualities and then project them outward. For example, a culture that values constant productivity may see rest or vulnerability as weakness. But in reality, those are essential aspects of wholeness. When we adopt society's definition of weakness uncritically, we become trapped. We internalize cultural shadows. To truly erase weakness, you must define strength for yourself. Do not let society's narrow standards, money, status, dominance, dictate what makes you strong. Jung would urge you to listen inward, to discover your own values. Real strength is not conformity, it is authenticity. And authenticity requires facing your own shadow, not living by borrowed definitions. So the next time you feel weak, pause. Ask yourself, is this weakness real, or is it a story society taught me? Is sensitivity really weakness, or is it my gift? Is introversion really weakness, or is it the source of my creativity? Is vulnerability really weakness, or is it the key to intimacy? By questioning these assumptions, you liberate yourself from collective illusions. At its heart, Jung's message is that weakness is not something to erase by force. It is something to understand, integrate, and transform. And when you do, you discover a strength that is not loud, not arrogant, not fragile, but quiet, steady, and unshakable. If we look closely at our lives, we notice that weakness is often the very thing we are most ashamed to admit. We hide it from others, but even more dangerously, we hide it from ourselves. Jung called this repression, and he warned that repressed material never disappears. It simply hides in the unconscious, waiting for a chance to emerge. That is why unacknowledged weakness tends to show up in moments when we least expect it. The person who represses fear suddenly has panic attacks. The person who represses sadness suddenly collapses in depression. The person who represses anger suddenly lashes out uncontrollably. What we do not face controls us. To erase weakness, then, does not mean pretending it doesn't exist. It means shining the light of awareness on it. And here's the paradox. The moment you fully face your weakness, it begins to lose its power. Awareness itself is transformative. Imagine being afraid of a dark room. As long as you don't enter, your imagination fills it with monsters. But the moment you step inside and switch on the light, you see it clearly. The room may still contain challenges. Maybe it's messy, maybe it needs cleaning, but it is no longer terrifying. Weakness works the same way. What you avoid becomes monstrous. What you face becomes manageable. Jung taught that wholeness requires honesty. Honesty with yourself first, then with others. Weakness thrives in denial. But once you tell yourself the truth, yes, I am afraid. Yes, I feel insecure. Yes, I need help. You begin to integrate. Honesty turns weakness into a doorway, and that doorway leads to freedom. Consider the courage it takes to admit vulnerability. Most people think vulnerability is weakness, but Jung would argue it is one of the greatest strengths. Why? Because vulnerability is the foundation of connection. When you allow yourself to be seen, flaws and all, you create authentic relationships. You no longer hide behind masks. You give others permission to do the same. Vulnerability requires strength because it risks rejection. But it is precisely that risk which makes intimacy and growth possible. So, when people say, I don't want to show my weakness, they are actually cutting themselves off from the very experiences that could make them stronger. Jung's wisdom tells us, you don't need to hide your weakness. You need to transform your relationship with it. Vulnerability is the seed of courage. Fear is the seed of bravery. Sadness is the seed of compassion. Weakness is never the end of the story. It is always the beginning. Let's go deeper into Jung's idea of individuation, because this is where the transformation truly completes. Individuation is the process of becoming whole, of integrating every part of yourself into one harmonious self. Weakness is an essential guide in this process. Each time you confront a weakness, you are integrating a missing piece of yourself. Over time, these integrations add up. You begin to feel less fragmented, less divided, less at war with yourself. You become whole. And here's the miracle. Wholeness erases weakness, not because you never feel afraid or insecure or sad again. You will. But those experiences no longer define you. They no longer shake you at your core. You can feel fear without being ruled by it. You can feel sadness without drowning in it. You can feel insecurity without collapsing. Weakness loses its grip because you have integrated it into your wholeness. Think of it like weaving a fabric. Each thread on its own may be fragile. Fear, sadness, anger, insecurity, on their own, they feel like weaknesses. But when you weave them together with your strengths, your joys, your hopes, they create a strong fabric of identity. Wholeness is that fabric. It is resilient, flexible, and enduring. It cannot be torn easily because every thread has its place. Jung also emphasized the importance of meaning in overcoming weakness. He believed that when a person has a sense of purpose, even their greatest struggles can be transformed. Weakness feels unbearable when it seems meaningless. But when you see your weakness as part of your path, as a challenge that is shaping you, it becomes bearable and even empowering. Take the story of Viktor Frankl, who survived the concentration camps during World War II and later founded logotherapy. Frankl often cited Jung's ideas and expanded on them. He observed that those who survived immense suffering were not necessarily the physically strongest, but those who found meaning in their suffering. Meaning transforms weakness into resilience. When you ask, what is this weakness teaching me? How is this shaping me? You give it purpose. And with purpose, you can endure and transform almost anything. This is why Jung believed that the spiritual dimension of life is essential. If you see yourself only as a bundle of flaws and strengths, your weaknesses may overwhelm you. But if you see yourself as part of a larger story, a soul on a journey toward wholeness, then weakness takes on a new light. It becomes a teacher, not an enemy. Now, let's return to the image of the dragon guarding the treasure. Your weaknesses are those dragons. They look terrifying, but they guard something precious. Every time you face one, you claim more of your treasure, your courage, your authenticity, your love, your wisdom. But unlike the myths, in which the hero slays the dragon, Jung's vision is different. You do not kill your dragon, you befriend it. You realize the dragon is part of you, and when you embrace it, it transforms into an ally. This is why Jung's work is so different from surface-level advice about self-improvement. He doesn't tell you to crush your weakness, to ignore it, to bury it. He tells you to meet it face-to-face, to learn from it, to integrate it. That is the only way to truly erase weakness, by realizing it was never weakness to begin with, but unacknowledged strength. So, how do we put all of this into practice? It begins with awareness. Start noticing the moments when you feel weak. Instead of criticizing yourself, pause and ask, what is this weakness trying to show me? What strength might be hiding here? The second step is courage. Facing your shadow is not comfortable. It requires honesty and bravery. But every time you choose to face it instead of avoiding it, you grow stronger. The third step is integration. Once you identify the hidden strength within your weakness, practice using it. If your sensitivity makes you feel weak, practice using it as empathy. If your anger makes you feel weak, practice using it to set boundaries. If your fear makes you feel weak, practice using it as a compass pointing toward what matters most. Over time, these practices reshape your relationship with yourself. Weakness no longer feels like a curse. It feels like an invitation. And with each invitation you accept, you become more whole. Now, let's imagine your life when you fully embrace this. Imagine standing in front of a challenge that once terrified you. You still feel fear, but instead of collapsing, you see it as energy. You take a deep breath, and you move forward. Imagine entering relationships without the old fear of rejection, because you know your worth is not dependent on anyone else. Imagine facing setbacks without labeling yourself a failure, because you see them as lessons guiding you toward growth. Imagine walking through life no longer ashamed of who you are, but grateful for every part of yourself, the light and the dark. This is the life Jung wanted for us. A life of authenticity, wholeness, and resilience. A life where weakness is no longer an enemy, but a teacher. A life where you do not need to pretend to be perfect, because you have discovered the quiet, steady strength of being whole. So, when you hear the words, "This video will erase your weakness," let them remind you that weakness itself is not something to be destroyed. It is an illusion born from avoidance. What truly erases weakness is the courage to face yourself, the humility to accept yourself, and the wisdom to integrate every part of who you are. In the end, Jung's message is both simple and profound. Do not run from your shadow. Do not deny your fears. Do not bury your wounds. Face them, embrace them, and let them teach you, because in the darkness you fear, there is treasure waiting. And when you claim that treasure, you will discover that you were never weak at all. You were simply unfinished. The journey of becoming whole is not easy. It takes time, honesty, and courage. But every step you take on this path erases a little more of the illusion of weakness. Until one day, you look back and realize what once made you feel powerless has become the very source of your power. And that is when you understand what Jung meant. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are.